Hey everybody, this is Tyler Nyland, podcast manager for Black Like Me. Wanted to jump on to kick off this episode because, as you'll find out in just a second, Dr. G is currently out on vacation. He is taking some much needed, well-deserved time off just to rest up, to take care of himself, as he'll explain a little bit more in this intro here. So happy for him to be able to take some time just to have for himself, but unfortunately that means news cycles don't stop, and really unfortunately that means racism doesn't stop. And racism has unfortunately hit us again. Our own state here in Wisconsin, the host state of Black Like Me, had this horrific incident of shooting of Jacob Blake with his 3 sons in the car, watching it happen. And what a horrific, continued, just brutal display of police brutality and racism that is continuing to happen in our country. It shows the need of voices like Dr. G's even more, and voices of community organizations like Nehemiah that strengthen the Black community, but also fight racism by directly attacking white supremacy and its anti-racist movements. And so today we don't have an episode fully devoted to that, but we do have an episode that directly confronts the things that continue to promote unjust criminal justice systems and unjust systems. And these next 3 weeks, we're going to be taking a deep dive into the criminal justice system. And so I ask that you would really lean into what is said here by top experts in their field. We have Nehemiah, the nonprofit that Dr. G is the founder of and president of, has a re-entry conference that is coming up here at the beginning of September. If you are interested in learning more about what you can do to work against systemic injustice, or just in general, you can go to nehemiah.org. That's NEHEMIAH.org, where you'll find resources. And you'll find a place where you can register for our conference. It's going to be incredible. It's going to be a time, it's going to be super insightful, and just a place for us to really look and lean in further to how we deconstruct these racist places. So if you're looking for something to do in response to such horrific things, that's a place to go. And today we are going to be jumping in to a conversation, a really good conversation. And so I ask that you again lean in. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Hey there, Black Like Me podcast listeners. Just a little personal update. I typically save up all of my vacation until the month of August so that I can have some concentrated time with my wife and daughter and then friends. So I usually do a lot of travel. Well, we all live in this world, so we know how different the world has been. So I'm not flying around like I would normally do, but I am taking some time off just to rest and recuperate. So if you don't hear my voice in the introductions, please know that all of the episodes that you'll be hearing on our Tuesday morning drops are new recorded episodes. We only drop the redos on Thursdays, but I'll have my team members doing the introduction, because I realize, just as an African-American influencer, if I don't have time away to work on my marriage, on being a dad to my adult daughter, to continue to care for my mom with Alzheimer's, to see to my health, my spiritual revitalization, then I'm no good to anyone. And so I'm glad that you get to hear the best of me on Black Like Me. But I just wanted to give you some insight into the fact that many of us who are in this kind of work struggle with self-care, and we have degenerative diseases as a result. We also now know, because of data that's proving it, that the pressures of systemic racism, the micro and macro aggressions, have an impact on Black lives, Black bodies, that make us more prone to diseases like COVID-19, dementia, prostate cancer, breast cancer, etc. And so we have to be really, really, really careful. So I say this for those of you who are African American and people of color who are listening, who love my voice of advocacy. I want to model something for you. Take care of yourself, because once you're finished, the movement will continue. I guarantee you. For those of you who are not people of color, who are from the dominant community, I want you to know that although many of us have taken a stance to be helpful and to be vocal advocates in this work of racial healing, reconciliation, the eradication of racial disparities, it takes a great toll on us. So just know that. Just know that. As you're thinking about your relationships and your friendships, people you want to check in on. You don't have to say, what's it like being Black today? But just know that if you have friends and family members, you're following Black leadership that's really vocal, that's providing true leadership in this space that we're talking about, check up on them. Take them out for a drink. Send them a gift card. Let them know you've got their back. Because we sense this. We approach it like it's a call. But we don't always know how to rest from the call. So I'm going to enjoy my bike. I'm ordering some camping equipment because my daughter wants to go camping with her dad. I want to do some road trips with the family and maybe a couple of solo road trips because I love to clear my head and just do that. I've been wanting to write and not work, right? Because I've got to do some of that too. But I'm a poet. And so there's just a lot that I've been processing that I've just got to get out also. So this is going to be a few weeks of self-care. But again, everything that will drop on Tuesday is fresh. We actually, we have a lot of stuff to still drop. So I appreciate your support and ask you to support us in all of the ways that we've asked you to support us. Now's a good time to do that. All right. You take care. Enjoy the show. You all hold it down, as I know my team will. And I look forward to talking with you real soon, my Black Like Me podcast family. Hey, good people. Grits or cream of wheat? Who the hell is racist? Does anyone ever ask if they touch your hair? Black Like Me.
You're listening to Black Like Me with Dr. Alex G., a podcast that invites you to experience the world through the perspective of one Black man, one conversation, one story, or even one rant at a time. Here's Dr. G.
Black Like Me. Hey, good people. Welcome back to another exciting episode of Black Like Me with Dr. Alex G. And season 4 is off with a great bang. And so I'm excited. Listen, we're all dealing with this coronavirus. And so I am grateful for my podcast manager, Tyler. Eli, our engineer, has given him the nickname, the Zoom Master. And you know what? And Zoom didn't even pay me to say that. But we found that we can actually record through Zoom because we're not able to get to the radio station where we normally record, because we want to really respect the space of WORT radio. I appreciate them allowing us to record Black Like Me there. But when they've asked us to slow down the traffic just so that we can make sure that staff is safe, that makes great sense. And so if the quality sounds a little different or there's a little extra background noises, just know you're getting a real deal. We're just keeping it all the way real. But because of the use of technology, we're crossing our fingers and some good editing. We have this episode today. I'm really excited because, we're talking about this theme, Wisconsin state of emergency. That there are so many things that are happening in Wisconsin for African-American people, or to African-American people, that aren't happening in the same way across the country. Because I live here, I vote here, I pay taxes here. I want to know why. So I'm talking to the policymakers, I'm talking to the politicians, I'm talking to the teachers, I'm talking to people who are formerly incarcerated, I'm talking to authors, I'm talking to folks just to get their take on how did we arrive here. Today, I'm really honored to have my friend and my colleague, Ed Wall, on the show. Ed is the author of Unethical. It's a book called Unethical, Life in Scott Walker's Cabinet and the Dirty Side of Politics. And the word side is a $. I connected with Ed Wall, former Secretary of the Department of Corrections, years ago. We've kept in touch. He spoke at our first reentry conference that Nehemiah put on last year. And when I saw him and he signed his book to me, I said, Ed, I want to have you on my podcast at some point. So it's a year later. It fits into this theme. But Ed Wall, welcome to Black Like Me. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you, Alex. It's my pleasure to be here with you.
So listen, I've read your book, and as a community activist, leader, pastor, I get handed stuff all the time, and I can't read everything, but I try to read excerpts of stuff Well, I ended up reading your book.
Well, thank you.
Well, because there were stories and insights, and I'm a behind the scenes kind of guy. I mean, I like to know what's happening behind the scenes. And so I appreciate the fact that, no pun intended, that you've allowed your life to be an open book. And it means a lot to me. And in fact, I was so touched by things that I read that I was going to have a couple of other reentry professionals on the call. I asked them not to come on because I decided to go a whole different direction after reading your book.
Well,
and so, sure. Well, so I'll just jump right in by just saying to folks. And so you started in the Walker administration as the Secretary of the Department of Corrections in 2012, and you served until about February of 2016. For those of you who aren't familiar with titles, a secretary at the state level is very comparable to the president's cabinet, where there's a secretary of HUD or Commerce, et cetera, et cetera. Ed Wall was the secretary of the Department of Corrections, which was the largest, and still is, the largest department in the state. Ed, I think you said in your book, like your biennium budget was like $2 billion. You did the math and said that's like $100 million a month.
Yeah, 2.65 billion, and it ran about 3.5 million a day, is what it typically ran.
And before that, I think you said the department you ran had an $18 million annual budget.
That's correct. Before that, I was the head of the State Division of Criminal Investigation, and prior to that, the head of State Wisconsin Emergency Management, who has their hands full today.
Oh man, I got you. So listen, how long did it take you to decide to write the book after you finished your tenure as corrections secretary in Walker's administration? Again, February, March of 2016. How long did it take you to say, I'm going to write a book? Was it sort of like a Mommy Dearest movement when Joan Crawford's daughter said, "I've got an idea. I know what I'm going to do." Did you know you were going to write it before you left, or what was the time frame?
I had a good idea only because the way that it was being spun by the governor and the attorney general at the time, that they had a narrative that they were putting out to the media, painting me as the problem, when in fact the problem I was running into was the governor and the attorney general, in trying to get them to understand that we needed to make substantive changes with Lincoln Hills, with the way that we're handling juvenile justice, the way that we're handling the prison system in total, all the issues we had at the establishments around the state, the problems with low pay and the impact that was having on the way that the officers looked at the jobs. They're getting overworked with enormous amounts of overtime, which in turn makes them cranky, and it harms the relationships that they have with the offenders. It was just as I called it at one point, it's a self-licking ice cream cone. It just keeps getting worse and worse. And we ran into a mindset with the governor, the attorney general, and some of the legislature that they weren't going to put a dime into corrections. And even when I was there, and a lot of the stuff that they did in the bill at the end of Walker's term was stuff that I had given to him in July of 15. And I said, this is what you need to do, and this is why this isn't working. And all I kept being told was, get it out of the paper. We don't care what you do, get it out of the paper. But when I said, okay, we're going to need some money to address this, we need mental health treatment, we need a lot of things, they said, well, we're not giving you any money. We'll let you move money around within your own budget, but we're not going to give you any money. And they didn't.
Right. I guess they said with a $1.3 annual budget, a $1.3 billion annual budget, I guess they figured, hey, we put enough in, make it work.
Yeah, they don't understand the logistics, though, what it takes to run that agency.
Sure, obviously, man. So you know what, Ed, this is what really captured me, and it made me read the book differently. You have snapshots at the beginning of the book, and I want to tell folks that I'll have a link in this interview. So if you just go down to the notes section, as I do with all my guests, I love to push their books, their materials, their website. So I'll have all that information here so that you can get this as well. But one of the snapshots that the former secretary said was, you never forget the taste of a gun in your mouth. The accurate assault on the senses of bitter metal, gun oil and tears of anguish swirling around together across your tongue as the brain races and the body trembles in protest. The clicking noise your teeth make shattering on a cold steel as you quiver in agony. The cold sweat and tingling fingers as fine motor skills abandon the body in anticipation of what is coming, fight or flight. Visions of the people you love, the people you hate, and those who you blame flash through the mind like a deck of shuffling cards. Likewise, you never forget the people and cascade of events that bring you to that deadly precipice, where the feeling that ending your life is somehow more appealing than what stands before you. However, if you are fortunate enough that God steps in and lifts you past the tenuous moment of deadly indecision to survive the mental anguish that tortures you, a stronger person can arise from the depths of despair. But you never forget that horror, the emotions, the cost, the taste. And, as I had to read this twice because I was thinking, well, okay, he must be reflecting back to when he was a police officer. He must have been arresting someone. He was a hostage. They put their gun in his mouth. But then, I stopped and went back and said, wait, he's talking about himself. He's talking about where he was. And I must have missed that part, Ed, of the talk at the reentry conference. But the fact that one of your staff members told you that the way criminal justice is structured now is that it is destructive to the inmate and also those in corrections. And we're going to get to what this does to people who are incarcerated. But can we just talk about this for a minute? Was this during your tenure? First of all, the vulnerability, the honesty. You don't hear folks of your stature in that role talking about their own gun in their mouth. I mean, was this during your tenure as a secretary? Was this part of your?
It was.
Wow.
It was. It was at the end. The governor and the attorney general had no clue what it means, especially to law enforcement, where your entire life, your entire career is built on your integrity, is built on your willingness to serve people, that you are there for the purest of reasons. And to them, integrity and service are political keywords, but they didn't mean anything. So for them to get the story away from them and the failures that they were doing as politicians, instead they looked to place the blame on someone else. And they thought nothing of making that person me. My entire career was law enforcement and trying to help others. I was asked to run 3 different state agencies, and I was not a politician. I haven't even, this year is going to be the first year I vote in this state. And I've never even voted because I did not want anybody saying I was one party or the other. Nobody who knew me could tell you what party I was because my political beliefs were mine. But I had two guys between Schimmel and Walker that just saw it as okay to sacrifice somebody's integrity, their name, their career for political expediency as a way to try and make the story go away. And they said intentionally misleading things. The attorney general was calling me a failed secretary. He had no idea what I was doing as secretary. He had no idea that I was staying up at Lincoln Hills day and night, working myself, being there, doing the line work, trying to help them get things done. Those things didn't matter to them. And what I watched happen to my family with my wife and my kids and people looking at them as if I was a criminal. And it just the pain was unbelievable. And I'll be the first to say, through my entire career, I would look at suicide and I could never understand how people could get to that point. And as I talk about in the book, my friend Craig, who was my director, he took his own life.
Right. And I remember you saying you didn't understand. I mean, you were helping him work on a grant, and then he shot himself like at the Risser building, right? Like where he was parked in the Risser building.
Correct. In the building, in his cruiser with his gun.
And found by his wife.
Who was an attorney there. And and Craig was one of my closer friends, and I had gone to the attorney general at the time, the deputy attorney general, and said, he needs help. And they were holding my position open, which was his main support person, because I was on a gubernatorial appointment and they knew that I had restoration rights. So they were holding the position open, and I went and said, fill my position. I'll come back as a special agent. I'll drop my promotion. Just, he needs the help. He can't do this alone. It's an entire bureau he's trying to run alone. And it was 72 hours later, he was dead.
That touched me too. I tried to connect the pieces in my head and my heart. Yeah, wow. I'm so sorry. That's tough.
And I was angry. I was very angry with Craig, and I thought to myself, if you had only given me 2 minutes, I know I could have changed your mind. And that's what saved my life. And and God stepped in, and I'm a firm believer. I'm a Catholic, have been my whole life. Almost became a priest when I was younger.
Wow.
And I felt very strongly that God stepped in when He did, and put Craig's face right in front of me. Just put him, was tough.
And I know this is a tough question, but I'm just curious. Were you at work? I mean, where were you going to do this? At work? At home?
No, I was up at our cabin. I was up at our cabin.
Gosh. Oh, Lordy. Well, I'm glad you didn't do that, man. I'm glad you didn't.
Well, thank you. Oh. Thank you. So am I. And that's never the right answer. I came out of it so much stronger. And now, but people said to me, "Why would you write about that? Why would you tell people that?" And the fact is that if we don't hear from people who got through that struggle, and the fact that there is brightness on the other side, that this is not the end, that you don't have to write everything off because of one incident. I let two dishonorable politicians come in and twist my life, twist my career, and make me into something that I had never been, that my entire career had never been, only to protect themselves. And they brought me to that point, and I'm ashamed to admit that I let them get me to that point, but I'm also proud of the fact that I got past that point.
Sure. So what do you say? What have you said to people who? Well, first of all, let me just back up and ask the obvious question. Like you talk about Walker and him, having egg thrown on him on a national stage, standing next to Trump at a presidential bid. You could certainly tell there was no love lost. Like, has he called you up since and said, "Hey, I'll meet you out in the parking lot"?
No, I'd never heard a word from him. No, he made when we were going through the employee issues, when the Attorney General had force transferred me out of my career civil service position, which is what I was appealing. And then I had sent my appeal document to the governor's office, said, "Read this over. It's gonna, it's a draft. I'm gonna change it, and you can shred it when you're done, but you need to know you're mentioned in it." And then they used that as a reason to terminate me, saying, "Oh, I told somebody to shred a public record." Well, it wasn't a public record. It was a draft. The Attorney General's office intentionally put up a smoke screen on that. I was never charged with any crime. I never violated a state rule, and yet they terminated me. And of course, it goes to the Wisconsin Employee Rights Commission, which are 3 people appointed by the governor, who sustain the action. And because I could have walked away and kept all my sick leave and all, but instead for me, it was principle. I said that position is supposed to be above politics. It's not an appointed position. The Attorney General can just swap out as he wants. Schimmel turned it into that, and the WERC supported it. And I lost over 2,000 hours of sick time that I had saved. I'd never taken a sick day in 16 years, saving that because I had a daughter with special needs who has hydrocephalus, and I wanted to make sure I had that in my bank.
Sure.
Because I appealed it and lost the appeal, I lost all my sick time. So I was still able to retire, but I lost all of my sick time, which was a huge thing for us. So it was, when Governor Evers' folks came to me, and they had heard I was writing a book and asked me if I would be interested in endorsing him and talking about it and doing commercials. I said, yeah, I absolutely would, because I'd met Tony and I liked him. And, but I knew what Walker wasn't. He was a good talker, but he was really just political talking points.
Sure, man. So Ed, what do you say to people who say, wow, okay, this is like an exit interview. Like you say all the things now in a book that you didn't say while you were in the position. What do you say to people who may think or ask, hey, Ed, it sounds like you're Breaking Bad now. After the fact, was there any point where you were going along with what some of Walker's cronies or fellow secretaries were doing? Was there ever a moment you were caught up in that momentum?
No, and I think that's one of the issues that probably hurt me with the Walker administration, because as a matter of fact, the chief of staff had made the comment to me that you're turning into a Democrat. And I said, no, I'm not turning into anything. I'm just merely getting educated. And if we're going to make changes in this system that are going to affect lives, that are going to affect, state budgets, if that's what you want to hear about as a Republican, this is how you do it. And, when they started telling me we should build more prisons, I said, that is not the answer. Building prisons is not the answer. I said, we need to put a relief valve back in. We need to be able to get people job skills. We need to keep them out of the prison, or when they get released, make sure that they won't come back, or do the best we can. And I also, had broached the subject with them a few times about changing the rules of probation. I said, the way this is written, I've got probation agents. Some of them see it as their job to be social workers and help these guys stay out of prison, and others see themselves as the rock hard hand of the law, and they would bounce them back into prison as soon as they could. And after I had left, I received letters from inmates, and I still receive letters occasionally. And a letter came to me, and it was an inmate who I had gotten to know, who was with the culinary arts program up at Oshkosh, did a great job. He had gotten released, came into Madison, got a job at a restaurant who we all know the name of. I won't say it to protect his identity.
Sure.
And was doing great there. He was the lead cook. The culinary arts program at Oshkosh is a 2,500-hour course. So you come out with a great certification and a high job prospect. He had an apartment. Everything was going well. But his underlying issue was substance abuse. And he had gotten into a few things on substance abuse, and one of the stipulations of his probation was abstinence. Well, his probation agent asked him, if he had anything to drink or do drugs or anything like that, and he was honest enough to say, a couple weeks ago at a party, I had a beer, but it didn't do anything for me, and I didn't finish it. And the probation agent bounced him and revoked his probation and sent him back. That was absolutely the wrong answer. He should have said, okay, well, we got to get you back into programming here. We'll get you back into AA. But he took his job away. He lost his housing. He only had 9 months hanging over his head. And they put him back in prison on the taxpayer's dime for a substance abuse issue that would have been better treated in the community with counseling and programming.
Exactly.
And those are kind of frustrations I ran into all the time.
And so what tied your hand? You were very open. You allowed me, Jerome Diller, Karen Reese, others come in your office and talk with you about our reentry work that we do through Nehemiah. And so we would hear you talk, Ed, about what you wanted to do, reform you wanted to bring, but then we would see agents doing just what you said. I mean, and the fear of that person is that if they answered it incorrectly, they could easily be put on the polygraph. And some of them were asked, is there anything that you answered in dishonestly? Or is there anything on this list that you violated that we didn't ask you about? So there's a lot of fear that's in that. And I have actually sat in with a gentleman. I asked the CEO, who's a personal friend of mine, to hire this gentleman. He was going to give him a job in sales. The agent berated not just the formerly incarcerated man, but this fellow African-American who owned his own business, who wanted this person to do sales. No, he can't do sales at Chili's or Applebee's because that's a bar. He can't work on the computer, although his crime had nothing to do with computers. She just kept pushing and pushing and pushing until my friend just threw up his hands and just said, you know what? I can't hire this guy and have someone enter his data in sales and tell him he can't go call on restaurants because they happen to have a bar in it. And she just kept on. I didn't believe that could happen, but I sat there with my own two eyes. I witnessed her put pressure on the employer. Or I heard her say, well, do you know his crime? Well, yes, Alex has updated me a bit. Do you know all the details? Do you know the whole story? And so when I hear about people getting training inside prisons, or Wisconsin's prisons, but then watch an agent basically just block someone like that, it's gut-wrenching. And I got to be honest, Ed, I would not have believed that had I not been sitting in the room and watched it.
Yep. And it's a fact. And the problem is the supervision from the secretary's office, that's 11 layers down that you don't get to sit in those and listen to them. Although I would go visit probation offices frequently, and I would tell agents the most powerful tool at your disposal is your discretion. And it is not necessarily the ability to lock people up, because that may not always be the right answer. And the frustration that I ran into was that everybody in that side, their careers were there. So they were career probation agents, career probation supervisors.
Right.
And there's a widely held view within corrections that secretaries are LTEs. So your ability to affect the operations within the agency only lasts as long as you do. And by the way, that usually is only, less than 2 years. So they kind of, they'll say, okay, we'll listen to what you've got to say, but you're going to be gone. And the next guy who's going to come in, or gal, is going to change things to the way they want it. So there's kind of we'll put up with you for while you're here. And, it gets frustrating as a secretary to look at that and know what needs to be done to change it, try to make the change. But in my case, not only did I have the corrections mindset to deal with, I had politicians that would absolutely not support it. And there was a group of probation agents in Milwaukee who didn't like that I was trying to advocate for changes in probation. And there's a conservative radio talk host over there who is a loudmouth windbag. Mm-hmm. And they were contacting him directly, and he was lambasting me on the air for letting people out of prison and doing this and doing that, and that I called me a Doyle holdover because Governor Doyle had appointed me as the head of emergency management. So immediately tried to politicize it. And I went to the governor's office, because the governor's office knew this guy, and they said that they wouldn't intervene, and so they left me pretty much at his mercy, even though I was doing what I was supposed to do.
Sure.
So it was a very frustrating time. I loved the Department of Corrections. I loved the people. I loved the mission. The problem was the politics that people look at it. So you've got legislators who look at the issue as a cash issue. And when Grover Norquist came to speak in Madison about doing away with truth in sentencing. Now, Grover Norquist is a really conservative speaker, and mm-hmm. he is just a little right of Attila the Hun. And he came to me before he had spoke, and he said, you've got to get your arms around your governor's head and tell him this doesn't work. And conservatives all across the country realize it doesn't work. And he said, and you can look to Texas, who puts more inmates to death than any place else, and they understand it doesn't work, and they're making changes. But our governor, and I'd spoken to the governor about it, had absolutely no intention. As a matter of fact, he was pushing, and as you see now coming out with the bill that the governor just recently vetoed properly, they wanted a tougher on crime bill.
Sure.
Well, that doesn't help anybody. And the evidence-based material tells us this doesn't work. And what we saw in the prison system when the tough on crime bills went through was the behavior of the offenders went down dramatically, because what's the benefit for them to follow the rules and do things effectively when they're going to be there for 10 years if they were sentenced to 10 years period. And
exactly.
You lose the incentive, and then it backs up the entire process, because now there's so many more people in prison that we can't get them through programming. And you just run into those constant frustrations as you go.
Sure. I mean, at one point in your book, you said if we keep it up at the rate at which we were going, we would need geriatric prison systems, because you saw men on walkers and in wheelchairs. My head is just flooding with all of these questions, so I'm going to just fire some of them at you.
Fire.
And part of it is because I think people would love to know some of this. Had you finished let's just say, had you stayed with Walker for his whole term, mm-hmm. and they hadn't messed with your position, would you have still written this book talking about how screwed up the administration was?
I think that I would have, and it probably would have been more focused on the need for prison reform as it was focused on Walker and Schimmel.
That's the book I want you to write. That's the book I want you to write. Really, about prison reform. Yeah.
Yep. It needs to be done. No, but it needs to be done. And I mean, that underlying current is what led the Walker administration to say, as they said, you're turning into a Democrat. And they saw it as a political problem. And they saw prison as a warehousing issue. And as I told the governor, this is not a warehousing issue. This is a social issue. And it doesn't start the day that somebody does a crime. This starts back, and I said, unfortunately, at birth for a lot of them. When I was in Milwaukee, when I first went to the Milwaukee Secure Detention Facility, I was up on the floor and walking around touring it, and an African-American teacher came out, and she had a group going on with a circle of men inside. And she came out to meet me and said, "What do you think of, the facility?" And Milwaukee Secure Detention Facility is a tough place to be in, without a doubt. There's no outside recreation. There's no anything. And I said, "Well, I'm trying to get my arms around the corrections issues." And she said, "You know what part of the problem is?" And she pointed into the room. And in the circle, she said, "Grandfather, father, son," all in the circle inside. And she said, between them, over 30 children. And the problem is we have broken homes. We have fathers who aren't there to help their kids. And we don't have any support mechanisms in place to give these kids alternate places to grow up and to be mentored and to learn. And that hit me like a right cross. It just stopped me in my tracks.
Now, at any point in that conversation, Ed, did she talk about what Nixon had done in terms of tough on crime, what had happened in the Clinton administration? I mean, I'm in these situations where people point to like 3 generations of folks in prison, but having 30 kids among you is not a crime. So they're not in jail for screwing. They're in prison for something else. And so I'm curious, you're a former cop. We got to look at sentencing and charging and all of these things.
Right.
And what we look for crime. Like in Madison, there's more crime on State Street, which is downtown. It connects the Capitol to the campus. Then you have up and down Park Street. But you get sometimes you get what you're policing for. So I guess what I'm wondering, this is what I was looking for as I read the book too. I love the behind the story thing. I like the way you took on Walker and Schimmel. I think I was looking for a chapter where you pull back the covers on the prison industry in general. These black men are in here under childbearing years, and the reason why we have so many kids without fathers is, many of these fathers that do crime. So I'm not talking about people not going to prison when they do stuff, but when there aren't alternative programs, when the police officers, the judges, the social workers, the counselors are white, and you don't have you create this system, and I'm afraid that people will hear the comment that woman made or read your book and think black people are the problem, and not talk about the failed system we have that encourages this. I mean, I'm thinking, hell, if you with a job, security, retirement, pension, family home, cottage, and you had your gun in your mouth and you got to go home every day, the folks who are over incarcerated, the folks trapped in truth and sentencing, the folks on meds, the folks who are in prison who are intelligent, but they're not getting GED programs. One of the things that Jerome Diller says often is that he's still waiting for the mental health services. He's been out of prison for 25 years. He's still waiting for those services. And so who tells the story, Ed, about how we get 3 generations of men in there? Because we create this issue, then we point to it and blame the victim. Who speaks to that? And have you given thought to writing that book?
Well, based on our conversation, I have, but okay. I can tell you that those were all the questions, Alex, that were bouncing around inside my head when I was there.
Okay.
When she made that comment to me, and then afterward, and my deputy secretary was Dee Dee Morgan, and I think that you know Dee Dee, and
I do.
She
tremendous individual,
incredible woman, African American, and she's the one who kept me from walking off cliffs all the time.
She was a warden at Oak Hill, right? When you met her,
correct. Yeah,
okay.
She was the chair of the parole commission. She was in juvenile corrections.
Sure.
She was all over. So she had so much experience, and Dee Dee and I had many talks about this. And this entire problem, as I said, and I as I speak at UW-Platteville, this problem begins too often at birth. These kids are born into a cycle of non-support, What are we doing to support them with after school programs? What are we doing, if they do get into trouble, what are the alternatives to incarceration? And I think that one of the things that you ran into, especially with Lincoln Hills, was you had politicians looking at it under the 1990s tough on crime lens of, these are just super violent youth and there's nothing we can do for them, lock them up. Well, all you're doing is creating a slide to go from there into the regular prison system.
Exactly.
If we don't step in and come up with substantive changes on how are we going to change these people? In the prison system overall, the backup waiting for programming was immense. One of my ideas, and the person who I spoke to about this was Tommy Thompson, and Tommy had contacted me, wanted to get together, and he told me how the signing the tough on crime bill and opening up Boscobel as a supermax prison was the worst thing he ever did. And that he understands now how bad off that was. And I told him, I said, well, I've got some ideas, and he had some ideas. I said, why don't we take Lincoln Hills and convert it into a technical college? And he liked the idea. And I said, I think it was a mistake to close Ethan Allen, since most of the kids are from down there. I said, and I had some tentative prices drawn up that between $5 and $7 million, we could have turned Lincoln Hills back on, moved the kids closer to home, take Lincoln Hills, convert it to because if you look at it, it's set up as a school, and then offenders coming into the end of their term could go up there and get, whether it's plumbing, electrical, carpentry, whatever. So if they come out with skills, I said, because and I told this to the governor, I told this to Mike Hipsch, I said, the only thing that we should be graded on is recidivism. And if we can't affect recidivism, whether it's in juvenile cases or adult cases, then we're just shoveling against the tide. Right. Because when you look back and we reincarcerate 3,000 to 4,000 people a year, that put the recidivism rate in Wisconsin, I want to say, is around 38%. That's, a lot of states are up at 50%. But that's not necessarily speaking to the individual. That's speaking to the lack of effort or the lack of funding that we're putting into making them successful.
Exactly. I think you bring up a good point. Let's talk about Lincoln Hills for just a minute. When that came up, I thought that was going to just rain fire down on Walker's administration. When that hit, I just thought, okay, here we go. This is what we've been waiting for. And almost as soon as it came, it just sort of went away. But I remember hearing about Ethan Allen, Lincoln Hills as a kid growing up. Friends would go there who had trouble. Many of them had mental health troubles or things that were happening in their homes that traumatized them. But when it came out, the children were being abused, that there were fight clubs and things that were set up. I read where you wanted to get Walker to come down and see it. But this system of corrections was already jacked up before Walker. I mean, he did not use his power to make it better because he was, had these presidential aspirations. But as you talked about it, I just couldn't believe how administration after administration, secretary after secretary, just let those things happen, to kids. Like if you go to a suburban school and we don't salt the sidewalk and a cheerleader or a white quarterback falls, parents are going to be suing. These kids are fighting each other. They're circling you, saying that kids' arms are being broken, that they're being abused. Right. I just can't believe we didn't bring national attention. And maybe your power is limited as a secretary, but of all the things you talked about, the part about Lincoln Hills broke my heart because I said, this is where we're freaking grooming kids for prisons.
Hi, this is Jeremy Holliday, and I'm one of the editors of the Black Like Me show, and I just want to take a minute now to talk to you a little bit about Patreon. The show that we put together here is the culmination of an effort of a lot of people, and in order to do it, we need your support. We've been working for a while to come up with a Patreon that works well for people, and the levels that existed before, we recently added the $2 level, which is there for you if you like the show and you just want to give a little bit of support. It's cheaper than a cup of coffee. I mean, I don't think you can find a cup of coffee anywhere, or half a cup of coffee for $2. And we have a $6 level where you'll get a shout out on the show, a $10 level where you could submit questions to Dr. G and he'll respond to them, and then the $25 level, which is whenever we have a live event, you get a VIP invite, and whenever we start producing merch, you get that that merch as well. So if you like what you hear on the show and you want to support it, go to patreon.com/blacklikeme and check out the levels to see if one fits for you. Now back to Dr. G.
And I guess one part, Ed, I got to ask you this one piece. I wrote a question maybe I read it wrong. I just wrote WTF, like what was going on when those kids circled you and started talking about things that were broken, and your response was to the librarian, whomever, hey, get their comments and if you have any information, email me on it. You never heard anything.
Yep.
Did you ever think this because the staff didn't bring it forward? I mean, like to ask staff who might be party to these crimes to communicate the victim, the minor's voice, seemed to be putting a whole lot on them. And I finished the book, but I threw it across the room and spit on it a couple times when you put that onus on the kids. So what the hell was up with that?
So what the
Friend,
way?
So what were you thinking when that happened, Mr. Ed? Because that infuriated me more than anything else in the book, because I just felt like they were trying to give this voice, and it just seems like when wealthy kids, white kids, cry out, there's just so much action, and I'm just thinking.
So let me give you a little background on it. Okay, let me give you a background so you understand the way that it was working.
Help me.
Let me pull you back.
Okay.
So when I came in, the governor's office had heard, they had gotten a letter from a judge 10 months before I was appointed. So I never heard about it. Okay. When I first went to Lincoln Hills, I'll be honest with you, it seemed idyllic if you can have such a thing in a juvenile correction facility. But when I went up there, I went through the school, I toured the school, I went outside, kids were playing flag football. I went out and played football with them for a little bit on the grass. And I walked around and said, this isn't that bad of an atmosphere to have these kids in. And the stuff that happens at the institution doesn't typically get to the secretary's office, even in adult institutions, very rarely, unless it's big. When I was contacted about it. The administrator or even the warden.
Okay.
They handle a lot of stuff at the institutional level that wouldn't necessarily get to the secretary. And, typically, even if it got to headquarters, to the administrator, it would stop there. Okay. And that's what I was talking earlier about the corrections culture sometimes is, we'll take care of this, we'll handle it. Mm-hmm. When I got the call and Dee Dee came in to brief me on the information that came in, I immediately said, contact the DCI and I'm going to the governor's office.
Sure.
And went down and explained it to him. When I went up to Lincoln Hills, and that's that area you're talking about in the book, I also talk about the fact that the way that the DOJ was approaching the case, and as you say,
Department of Justice.
Justice, right. That all of a sudden it just seems to disappear. That was the whitewash. So I became convinced that the governor's office was telling the attorney general, drag your feet on this. Don't rush in. We don't want this in the paper. And the attorney general's office had one agent working part-time on the case. And I remember the frustration I had, and I said to the deputy attorney general, what is it going to take for you to put resources into this? I said, what's more important? Because they called us a few times to say, we're going to have to put your case in the back burner. And I said, tell me exactly what's more important than allegations that state employees are hurting kids.
Right.
And why is it that this is put on the back burner for anything? Now, with that, with DOJ agents coming in periodically asking kids, are you being beaten, you being this, or you being that, it spun the institution up really bad. So when I was walking across, out in the quad between the buildings and the grass, and the kids were in line walking to school, and they're yelling, "I'm being beaten, I'm being this," but they're laughing and they're making a joke out of it. And in that particular case, when I was with the kids in the library, and I said, "Okay, tell me what happened to you." And every one of them said, "Well, I know a guy, or I heard about a guy." And I said, did anybody ever hurt any of you? And the response was no. So nobody there had actually been hurt, but they heard about somebody, or they had, that somebody else told them about something. And the librarian, who is the employee that I told, I said, and I told the kids, I said, if something happens to you, I want to know about it. And if you can tell me the names of any of these people that were hurt, then tell me about that. And I said, who whose arm was broken, whatever. I said, I want to hear about it. But I didn't just walk out of there while you were spitting on my book and throwing it across the room. I ended up going back up. That's when I turned around and started going.
And picked it back up.
Well, I started going up there every couple days. So
okay.
I decided that the only way I was going to get ground truth was to be on the ground. So I had ordered all kinds of cameras to be installed all over the place. That's the reason these Fight Club things popped up, that they were doing it in areas where there's no camera coverage. We put in $100,000 plus of new cameras that we had installed. And I came up one day and I said, where are the monitors in the main entry to the prison? They were supposed to have the monitors there. Oh, well, the maintenance guy hasn't had a chance to get down here to put the wall mounts up. And I took my coat off and I took my tie off and I said, somebody get me a ladder and the mounting kit. And they were all like, what? I said, I'm going to put them up. I said, I know how to put up a mount for a TV. I said, I want these monitors up. I said, this is crazy that we've got cameras installed and nobody can see what's on the cameras, because you kind of run into that frustration of who's dragging their feet on this. And what about get these up as soon as possible? Didn't you understand? And they called, the maintenance guy came hustling down, and I said, what is it that you put ahead of this job? Because this has to be done. We have to have these monitors up. And then they got into gear and they had them up that day. But that's what frustrated me, was that I had to go to that point. And I think I talk in there about the night when they called me at home that there was going to be a big fight on the girl side. And I said, get recorders and have people go out there and record it. And they said, well, the recorders don't work. They haven't worked for years and the batteries are all dead. I said, well, have somebody go buy the batteries or buy a new camera. They said, nobody's got a purchase card. I said, well, you know what? I've got a damn purchase card. Right. And I got in the car. This was on a Saturday night. And I left my family, went to Best Buy in Madison, bought the cameras, and drove up there myself. And I walked in a crummy old sweatshirt, jeans, and they were kind of shocked. And I put the cameras down. I said, open them up and start putting the batteries in them and get them charged. And they said, well, the batteries won't be in charge in time. I said, then walk out on the floor and have the cameras in your hand. They said, but they won't work. I said, nobody knows that. I said, this is about deterrence. And I said, you guys have got to start thinking on your feet here. We can't let these kids, start fights with each other to start fights. I said, it's our responsibility to keep them safe. And we're not going to keep them safe by saying the batteries don't work.
Did anyone who ran that, you're right. Did anybody lose their job over that? Like if that were the business world or nonprofit world, we just like, hey, you're out of here. And is it because it's a civil servant process? Like how can you be that inept and keep a job and retire on, taxpayers' dollars? Like, was that not within your power to fire somebody right then?
No, I couldn't have fired anybody right then. And what you have to understand is where do you draw that line? Was it the officer's fault on the unit who doesn't have the cameras anyway? Was it the supervisor's fault who was working that night but may not have had anything to do with buying cameras or keeping batteries? Was it the captain's fault?
It's the head of the place that let that happen on their watch. That's right. I mean, that's how it started in business. If some things are going on, you'll hear of presidents of universities resigning because of what was allowed to happen. So I guess what I'm trying to see at is you bring great light to it. But it's almost like when someone witnesses something and they don't necessarily stop it, but they come and say, Alex, I can't believe how racist that person was. Do you know what they said to me about you? And my question is, well, what did you say to them? Not that it's that person's job to police for me, but it's not their job to come and tell me what they said either. So I guess I'm just wondering, this will always stop if excuse the phrase, if heads don't roll, and the perception on the outside is that you can do that and no one loses their jobs. But that's just heartbreaking that you just kind of come back, people come back to normal, the system comes back to normal, and so many lives have been destroyed, and a lot of kids should not have been there. They should have been getting mental health issues and stuff. So it just hurts my heart, because this is the backstory of what I think was filling up our prisons, and it's taking folks who are not getting the help they need and then retraining them, giving them a new orientation, putting them in segregation, like you talked about, like someone who'd been in segregation or solitary confinement for 7 years in Colorado, killed your colleague, your counterpart in Colorado. We're watching people who may not been at that level of criminology, but by not having their mental health issues treated, and then they're bombarded by other people who have those issues, and they're beaten and abused, and it's like we're creating these mutations of individuals that are coming back into the community, and then we lock them up again after they've destroyed a lot of lives, and it's depressing.
Yeah, when all the things were going on with Wisdom, for instance, and I had started the first iteration, if you will, of segregation reform in Wisconsin, and I felt very strongly about it. And Jerry, the Reverend over there at Wisdom, came out and was attacking me constantly and didn't understand. And I tried to talk to him and said, the changes I want to make are not changes I can do with the stroke of a pen. And I've got a governor who is not in favor of changing any kind of segregation rules. And I brought this up at cabinet meetings, and you get that look of, a lion watching a hyena moving in on their kill when you start talking about we need to reform segregation and the damage it does to mental health. And, he just didn't understand what I was trying to do. And I went and I studied it. We put together a committee. I said, this is how it's going to happen from now on. When I started reviewing segregation orders and and I talk about this up at Green Bay, we had an inmate who worked in the kitchen who he'd taken some cilantro because he liked it in his ramen noodles.
Right.
And he was put in segregation for 6 months.
For cilantro.
With the justification saying that, well, he could make hooch, that he could make, some kind of an alcohol. And I was furious. And I called up there, and the security director, who was the one who approved it, I had him transferred immediately. And I told the warden, I said, this was your fault. But the warden, the way the segregation was written, the warden wouldn't review those segregation orders. And I read that whole thing, and I said, the warden will review every segregation order within 48 hours if it's a weekend. And that the security director will review it, and nobody's going to be kept in segregation longer than this many days. And then they're going to get a hearing before somebody, and they're going to get mental health continued the entire time they're in segregation, because you go to segregation and then all of a sudden mental health stops. Right. And there's so many things, Alex, that could be done differently in presence.
Mental. Let me just ask you. You said mental health services stops when someone goes to segregation.
Depending on what their mental health service was. Some of them would get mental health services. Others, if they were, if it was a substance abuse issue, or when they were doing counseling or whatever, where they were in group counseling and things like that, that would stop.
Sure. Wow. Hey, just a couple more questions. Man, your transparency and stuff is just, and honestly, I appreciate it. If you're a Secretary of Corrections for 1 day, for 1 week, let's just say for 1 week, you had to step and fill in. What could a stronger partnership with community leaders have done to bring light to what's going on in prison, so that it was not just incumbent upon you, a political appointee? Is there anything like, what would you do differently to work with community folks to help you carry that water about what you were seeing at Lincoln Hills in segregation?
Yep.
What would you do differently?
The problem is that the community leaders, unless they have impact on the politicians, are a wonderful asset, but the ability to make change is exceptionally limited. I was able to understand very quickly after I went in there and looking at evidence-based results on who was doing better when they came out of prison. And I very quickly saw those working with faith-based groups did better. They had people to take them into their arms when they came out. And as you and I had talked about back when I was secretary, those were the problems. Those were the programs, rather, that I wanted to fund. Those are the ones. And of course, I was accused of being, you're giving favor to this religious group or that religious group. And I said, no. I said, it's not the religion as much as it is the mindset around bringing people back into the community and wrapping their arms around them, because cutting a guy out of jail or out of prison and, saying good luck, hope everything works out for you. If we didn't send them out with job skills, if we didn't send them out with the programming they needed to change the issues they had with mental health or substance abuse or anything else, then all we're doing is saying to them, see you in a little while, not goodbye.
Wow. Right.
That's the problem. That's the problem.
Right.
And we have to prepare people to go out and be successful. And as I told the governor, I said, he had said to me once at a cabinet meeting early on, he goes, so how's everything with the prisoners? And I said, the prisoners? I said, if I only had to deal with the prisoners, if that was my biggest problem, I'd be playing golf 5 days a week. I said, the problem is the staff, our policies, the budget, all the things that are controlled that the prisoners don't deal with. We don't have enough people to do mental health. We don't have enough teachers. We don't have enough counselors to do the programming for substance abuse, all the things we didn't have. And meanwhile, they want to build more prisons. And I said, how are you going to staff them? You can't staff the ones you have now.
Right.
And I had brought back a plan to build a large central prison complex, someplace near one of the bigger cities, that would have all levels of custody in one place. You'd have low custody, medium, and max, and have all of the resources in one place, near where you can hire people. Try and hire people up at Lincoln Hills.
Right.
You're very limited. Come down here where you're near Madison or Milwaukee, where you can get nurses, you can get doctors, you can get psychologists, you can get the people to come and work for you. And their answer, and I said, if you open this complex, and I looked at another state that did it, and I gave it to them as an example, I said, you'll be able to close 4 prisons and have it in one place. And eventually, if we take on our responsibilities for doing programming, for doing job skills, we will be able to reduce the population. And, the number everybody was looking at was, let's reduce it by 50%. And I said, I'll be honest with you, I don't think you can do 50%, at least not immediately, but that's the goal you want to reach. But you've got, between the law and the sentences that were given out, it would take you 3 or 4 years just to wade through the 24,000 people incarcerated, because you would have to have the law behind you to change the sentences, et cetera. And then a large part of that burden then shifts to community probation. Sure. And if we don't have community corrections fixed, then we're just sending them back in.
Right.
This is you have to attack. Right. You have to attack this problem from all sides. Sure. And it takes the commitment of the legislature. It takes the commitment of the social groups outside the prison. That's why Nehemiah was one of my favorite groups to work with. You guys had a vision, and that vision involved, what are we going to do to help these people? And what are we going to do to help them what are the 3 main things you need? Housing, food, and hopefully a job. So that, and clothing and support. And I found that the people who were most focused on that were the faith-based groups.
Right.
Because they looked at the base.
Right. And we're still not getting supported for that. I mean, we have contracts for housing, for temporary housing, but in terms of just straightforward, like support, even for the buildings we purchased or for the services that we do, Anthony Cooper and I raised money for that, to offer those services to the community. And so we're a contracted provider of services, right? But and that's housing. But in terms of our real magic, lived experience, cultural competence, and ability to develop leaders and help people heal from their past, we're still not funded by the state doing that. Hey, just a couple of other questions. Job training. I rarely talk to anyone, Ed, who comes home from prison and say, you know what, I want to apply for a job in this area because this is kind of the job training I got. And I know that I was told by someone at the headquarters on East Wash, where your office used to be, they took me down to, I was trying to find a photo of it. I took a picture of it, and I have it in my computer, but I just didn't want to be clicking in the background. But the mission statement of I forget the name, but like job development, the prison job development skills. It basically says we train people to have meaningful jobs when they leave here. And when people took me on a tour, they said, Reverend G, don't go and buy your furniture from the high expensive furniture stores. Come here. We build ergonomically designed furniture. We have clothing. We have desks. We have they were trying to get me to get my church to buy our equipment and our furniture from there. But I've been working in reentry on and formally, informally for 20, 25 years. I have yet to have someone say, you know what, I got some good skills making hoodies. I got some good skills making design furniture. Who lets that crap continue? It felt oppressive. When I went in there, I took out my camera. I said, even if they got surveillance and they get me for this, I'm doing this because I'm gonna blast this. But they basically said, we do this to provide good training. It's very similar to the mission statement of like the what's it called, CCI, Corrections Corporation, or CC, whatever that is, the privatized prison stuff. This mission was so similar. It basically said, in order to give people something to do and training for meaningful jobs when they get out. But yet I sat with a man who was going to be, who had an opportunity of earning like $40,000, and the agent talked him out of it. Nothing he learned, no training he got in prison has helped any of the men that I know right now that we have served or housed find jobs. And so how does that facade of job training continue? Can you redirect, can somebody redirect that money? Because that doesn't seem to be true.
So when they went to work in Badger Correctional Industries, BCI.
That's it. Yes.
Yep. They put together desks and stuff that they buy from elsewhere. And those jobs, for the prisoners like those jobs because they pay well. So prisoners often.
What's a good pay? Yeah, I mean, we're talking about like like $1.50
50 cents an hour, 50 cents, $1 an hour. That's a good paying job.
Yeah. And your restitution stuff come up. But I'm sorry, I just have to clarify what we're talking about.
Right. On a prison range, that's really good. So, and the other place that they like to work is with the farm. So, and I'll share with you a kind of a cute story. Up at Waupun, Wisconsin Department of Corrections had one of the largest dairy herds of the state. Most people don't know that. And they produce all the milk, butter, ice cream for our state and for the Minnesota Corrections Department. And Becky Cleefish wanted to go tour because she was the jobs ambassador for Walker, and she wanted to tour the farms. And we go up to the farm, and in the milking parlor, there were a bunch of guys working in there, the vast majority of them African-Americans from Milwaukee area, who had wanted to get in there because those jobs pay like $2, $2.50 an hour. So that's a lot of money in the prison world. And they were in there, and they're milking cows, and she's walking around and with her knee-high rubber boots, and goes over to one of the fellas and says, "So do you see yourself going into this career field when you leave prison?" And I just couldn't, I'm shaking my head. And the guy just kind of turned and looked to her, and he goes, "You mean milking cows?"
Right.
And she says, "Yes." And he goes,
on a farm in Wisconsin. Wow.
Yes. He says, "No, not at all." And, Dee Dee said to me, I can't believe she asked that question. This guy's, he's doing what he needs to do to get money and to survive in prison. This isn't a job skill that he's going to take out and try and go to a dairy farm in northern Wisconsin.
No,
he wants to get back to Milwaukee to his family and where he's got support systems. What we should be doing, and I make a differentiation between prison job and job skills.
Gotcha.
So
that's helpful.
If you're in there and you're working those jobs because you want the money, no problem. But we have an obligation to go beyond that and say, okay, you were able to work at the farm this time. You're coming to your last year right now. You really don't have a lot of marketable skills. What are we going to do to get you marketable skills? So one of the things I did, I talked to the Department of Workforce Development and said, where are you seeing your biggest shortage, or what type of workers right now? And they said machinists. So I went out and bought an expensive trailer and equipped it with CNC, computer numerical controlled equipment. And then we had that taken from institution to institution, and the guys would sign up for the classes, and they would come out certified through the technical college system as CNC machinists.
Wow. And does anyone track to see if they actually get hired? Like, are there rules and things?
Their placement was almost 100%.
Really?
Those guys came out with that, and we had manufacturers coming to us looking for guys to put to work with this.
Wow.
So because there was such a shortage of skilled machinists. And that was a good example of us working with Department of Workforce Development to say, where are you seeing the shortages? Let us train to the shortages. Let's not send them out with basket making skills if that's not what people are looking for. And the thing that became very apparent to me was the skilled trades are hurting. And whether it's carpenters, electricians, plumbers, and that's when I went back to technical college and said, what can we do to fix that? And let's take Lincoln Hills, which was built as a school, and convert it into a technical college, and we can have all of those majors in there that they can go in and pick what they want to do.
And it was turned down.
And go through the program and come out certified with skills that they're going to come back and get a decent job with, because those positions pay good money.
Sure, they do. Hey, two more questions and one comment. I really appreciate your generosity of time. Race is discussed when it comes to Wisconsin's mass incarceration system. So
Absolutely.
can you just give me a 1 minute overview, a real honest overview? Because I think as people are listening, they appreciate all the transparency and stuff, but they want to know what's going on with Black folks. And
Sure.
I think we have enough issues of how we got there. I think I guess I'll combine my two questions into one. What do you wish you could have done, or what was in your power to do that could have changed the lack of diversity among people who are employed by prison systems and the off-the-chart representation of African-American people in it?
Good.
What do you wish you had done to change that?
So as I've told you, the limit of a corrections secretary to change those things is super limited. And when I came in, I was astounded to find out we were number one in the country for disproportionate incarceration of African American males. And you ask yourself, how do you get to that point?
Number one.
And when Ed Flynn answered, the police chief in Milwaukee, and said, well, it's because they do more crimes, I thought that was a pretty terrible answer.
Right, and untrue.
Right. And the fact of the matter is that roughly 70% of the inmates in Wisconsin's prisons come from the Milwaukee area, which most people don't, they don't realize that. So but I also tell people that you have to remember the correction system is a catcher, not a pitcher. We're just taking in what a system is sending to us. Right. So we are responsible for reincarceration if they're probation issues, but they're coming out of the court system to us. And the path to change starts, as I said, when they're kids, but also with how does law enforcement deal with them? What's the prejudice there about what their sentences are when they go into the court system? What's the prejudice as far as what they're sentenced to when the judge gets them? And then the prison system just takes in what they're given. So they've got to work with it. Now, as far as the staff within corrections and the makeup of diversity in corrections, the problem is our prisons are spread all over the state. So in the vast majority of them are in the northern 2/3 of the state, where you have to hire who's there. And that was one of the issues that I was trying to address by bringing a large campus type solution near one of the major hiring hubs, so that we would have a more diverse relationship with our workers, and that we could get more people in there who would understand the people that they were actually tasked with overseeing.
When you go up north like that, you know the demographics. So I don't mean you, because you didn't build it. Whoever the governor was, when you build in northern Wisconsin, when you go above the Dalles, you know that you're not going to have Black people. So it's not like, well, this is where it's not like we're talking about the boundary waters and we can't get Black people to come up to northern Wisconsin.
Right.
People put those prisons in places where they knew Black people wouldn't come there. So the issue is not that. The issue is someone knew where they were putting those prisons and who they were going to give jobs to.
See, here's a mistake you're making. As my friend, I'll tell you. You're looking at it ideologically, and you have to understand prison placement is completely political. Completely. It's what are they going to put in that area to bring jobs to my district? And that's how prisons are looked at all over. And I think same thing. No, you're right. In what the problem I ran into when I talked about closing prisons was not what's the racial makeup of the staff or the inmates. It's what's going to happen to the jobs to the people in my district. So it was completely politically motivated, and that's what you have to get past. What you have to say is, having a prison up in Forest County isn't going to do us a lot of good when it comes to hiring. And by the way, we can't hire enough people, and we lose people so rapidly because where they're working and where they're at. I mean, that's a fact of life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I believe that it has been clearly politicized, and some have thought
Oh, absolutely.
prisons were put in places where farms were failing and wanting to create jobs. But I remember with your predecessor, I had asked Gary Hamlin, tell me about what are the requirements for wardens, and we had some good meetings, but he did not like my question that I requested in writing, so he gave me the information, but it was handwritten. Like, he's the Secretary of Corrections. He sent me paper that was handwritten in I won't say pencil.
So what was this question you didn't like? How do you pick a warden?
Yes, and I was surprised that, like, to be a warden, you only needed a high school equivalency. So my question was, Mr. Secretary, you can't find black people in the state of Wisconsin with GEDs. Like everyone's talking about. I understand that you may not have that many black mathematicians in Madison who want to work at Epic Systems. So I could see them having difficulty because of, not that black people don't know math, but who have chosen math as a major and they want to work in that kind of healthcare industry. But to understand that it is harder to become a farm tech at Walgreens than to become a warden in terms of education and training, and to not have people in those positions, and the fact that no one would say, could this be why we're leading the nation? That maybe that we're missing something that folks could talk and relate. I just think someone, and maybe this is where the community can put some pressure on politicians. We got to sound that alarm, because I just know how I reacted when I had black instructors. People who I can relate to, who understand me. Those rural areas, very limited interaction with people of color. What you know, what you don't know comes out in your speech and your action. And again, that emotionally is just setting people up for more frustration. You come from Milwaukee. 70% of the inmates come from Milwaukee, where it is more diverse, to northern Wisconsin, where people are calling you boy or worse and provoking you. That's a reality, and someone's got to change that. I could not believe you only need a high school diploma to become a
Now,
warden.
I hope they're changing that. I was shocked when I found that, and I came in, and very few of the wardens had college degrees, which dumbfounded me. But then again, I'll be the first to say that, I've got my bachelor's degree, and I went to the Naval Postgraduate School for Executive Leadership, and the most valuable lessons I learned in life were not in college. And that's, common sense and how to work with people and things like that. So I don't know if I would want to say it's just the college degree, but there is a culture, as I've mentioned several times, with corrections, and that's how you ended up with that, is people came through the system, and it was their time. It's their time. It's there for them to be a warden. And the problem was you didn't have a lot of black men working in corrections. They still don't have very many black men working in corrections.
Well, because they're not hiring them. I mean, I know people who are applying, they're not hiring them. Again, my thing about the high school equivalency is people often say people don't have the credentials, but you're hard pressed to prove to me, not you, but the system, that they can't find black people with college degrees who would not like to make $80,000. My folks drove to GM every day, my mother and stepfather, because they were making $14 an hour. People would have driven to those places and commuted. But I think what happens in Wisconsin is we say it's cold, it's white, it's isolated, we can't get good people. And then no one's really checking the fact that where we can begin, I believe where we can begin to change the outcomes would be within the wardens and the people who get the folks. There's a reason why Dee Dee Morgan stood out to you. She was the people's warden. She wasn't just a black person's warden. So I'm not asking them to do that any more than I'm a black people's leader. But the fact is, when a sister who was strong and fair was on the grounds, it got a different response with where they're coming from. She wasn't going to call somebody the N-word. She wasn't going to berate a guy in front of his friends. And so I just wanted to bring that out for people who are listening to understand we really can bring more black people into the system, because education is not the limitation. I think you hit it head on, Ed, that it's your turn. It's like being at the plant. You work for there's a foundry, there's a plant in your community, and your dad was here, and your uncle was part of the union, and so you get promoted. But I just wanted to bring that piece out. Hey, just one last comment, and I just want to say, I was in a meeting that we hosted at Fountain of Life. I think you were new in the position, and you brought like 15 of your folks. Do you remember that? Our church had just opened up.
I was very new at the time, and what you find when you become secretary that you have an entourage. And
that was impressive. As
my term went, but when I went to meet with you, I had told Dee Dee, I said, Dee Dee, I think that the faith groups are a key to where we need to be. And I said, I don't want to go there alone and hear what they have to say. Let's bring the people who are going to make decisions with us, who are going to actually follow through on this stuff with us. And that's why I apologize if I overwhelmed you.
No. That's like my point. No, it wasn't. In fact, I felt honored because no one in previous positions brought anyone. Had you just come with Dee Dee, we would have said he's showing off his black deputy. And so you had to bring the balance. And so you brought folks who were not black, but there are people there like Jewel Kavanaugh. I mean, there are people there who are conscientious and answered our questions. Someone in the audience asked you a question about segregation, and you two kind of got into this disagreement from the front. And things got a little heated. They got a little heated. You got a little heated. And
remind me what was said, because I don't hold a grudge for very long. So
and the point of what was said is not as important as what I'm going to say next. I think they were talking about that they had served in segregation, and the response was, we don't do that in Wisconsin. And they're saying, no, I can tell you, I've been in it. But the point was, you got heated. You turned a little red. You raised your voice a little. But what you did on the stage is you said, can I come back? I did not answer this gentleman fairly. I let my ego get in the way. I let my emotions get in the way. Sir, I'm sorry. I want to hear your question. So when we're finished, can you and I talk? Some people would have done that privately. Like they would have made their way to them and said, hey, I'm sorry, we kind of went this way. I respected the fact that you stood on that platform in front of a room full of people and you said, you know what? I didn't answer that question right. Let's talk, because I want to really hear what you're saying. That was important. That level of leadership to the community was a very important message. So I want to share that, because people who listen to this are trying to figure out how do they navigate better racial harmony and relationships. And part of it is, not that was about race, but part of it is people forget how far an apology goes, or just say, you know what, I didn't hear you out, I cut you off. But I just needed to say, as a person hosting that meeting, I remember how it felt in the room as you are. No one was yelling. It was just a difference of opinion. But I also felt that tension dissipate, because when you broke it and said, I'm sorry, you and the two of you actually had a discussion. But I think that
and we talked after the meeting.
Yes, you modeled something for the team and for the others who are there, that we got to keep talking. And so I feel like your book is a way of doing that, Ed. I think your being on this podcast and allowing my listeners, who are now in like 50 countries around the world, are listening to figure out, how do people address issues of race, particularly in Wisconsin. But I just want to let folks know that impressed me. That I think that honored folks. And I would love to, once we're allowed to get for people to meet in the same space, or we can listen. In the meanwhile, we're creative. You can get coffee, I can get a coffee. You can get a beer, I can get a beer. We can face chat and do this. But Ed, Mr. Wall, Mr. Secretary, that book on like the expose you did of revealing Walker for what he is, if you or retired colleagues would pull that back in honor of your friend Craig, in honor of your friend, is it Tim, who was a secretary, and in honor of the folks who went into this work because they wanted to help people. I underlined that when I started reading your book. I wanted to do good. And then you end up with a freaking gun in your mouth because of all the political play. And while all this happens, Walker has been dethroned. You're in another role, but some of the same people who were serving truth in sentencing sentences are still there. Like people have left the Capitol, have left the old AmFam building, but those folks are still there. And so I would just like for you to consider that piece, because I think someone just needs to voice it so we can feel like we're not crazy. This is happening to our people.
You're not at all.
So please think about that. So
I will.
Listen to you.
I will, my friend.
Please,
maybe we'll write it together.
You know what, Ed? I would help you on that. I'm very serious. Listen. I didn't want to be presumptuous or as presumptuous to suggest that, but let's at least have a talk about it.
I would be happy to.
Because I think that's that's meaningful, because one of my staff members, and Aaron, one of them said, he said, we keep saying let's fix the system. He said, but the system's doing what it's designed to do. And I don't mean on this watch, but at some place, people knew that this wasn't working. Mark Maurer wrote in his book, Race to Incarcerate, that prisons were going to be closed in the early 70s because they weren't proven to really change folks. And so you just have a very respected voice. I'm honored that you say that to me. I'm a writer. I got a couple books out myself. We're going to chat.
I would love to.
With something in our hands.
I would love to.
But I want to let you know I appreciate your friendship. I appreciate your candor. I appreciate your honesty and your time. And,
thank you, my friend.
But you
and I will always be honest with you, and we will, if we have opportunities to disagree, there's no reason that we can't come out of it with a better and more informed opinion.
Exactly. Well, thank you. My guest today has been the former Secretary of Corrections, Mr. Ed Wall, from 2012 to 2016. We've been talking about his book, Unethical: Life in Scott Walker's Cabinet and the Dirty Side of Politics. Listen, people who work for corrections, police officers, folks who've been involved in the prison system. You must share this. You must retweet this. You must tag this. You got to let people know, because this is real talk. And we have the honor of having Mr. Wall here with us. So as always, Black Like Me listeners, go to our Patreon page and find out how to support us. We've gotten some new people recently, and I'm going to be shouting you out real soon. But as always, listen, lean in, learn, process this so that it brings about a change in your perspective, and then share this information and do something that's different. If you haven't yet, subscribe to Black Like Me so that you get each episode directly in your device, and you'll never miss a beat. Thank you so much for being a listener and for being a part of this and for helping Black Like Me to be in its 4th season. Ooh, Black Like Me, yeah. I want to thank Corey Saffold for creating the music for this podcast, my podcast manager, Tyler Nyland, engineer and editor, Eli Steenlich, my editor, Jeremy Holiday, and a special thank you to WORT Studios, where we record Black Like Me. Ooh, Black Like Me.
Thank you for listening to today's podcast. You can find out more about Dr. Alex G's amazing work at www.alexg.com. Black Like Me is sponsored by the generosity of the Human Family Unity Foundation. Ooh, Black Like Me. Ooh, Black Like Me.